to recognize the members waving on. And first on the list here, I see Mr. Burgess. Doc Burgess, are you with us?
Yeah, I am. Good.
Okay. You're
Sorry,
recognized.
find my cursor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to our witnesses for spending so much time with us. And this is clearly a very important issue to every member of this committee, regardless of which political party they identify with. And I guess, Mr. Zuckerberg, let me just ask you a question, because it strikes me, listening to your answers to both our colleague Jeff Duncan and our colleague Angie Craig, both coming at the issue from different directions. But the concern is that there was the exercise of editorial authority over the postings that were made on your website. Is that a fair assessment?
Congressman, I'm not sure what you mean, but I think content moderation and enforcing standards, I don't think that that's the same kind of editorial judgment that, for example, a newspaper makes when writing a post.
Yeah, but maybe it is, because Mr. Duncan eloquently pointed out there was restriction of conservative speech, and our colleague Angie Craig eloquently pointed out how there was restriction of trans-affirming speech. So that strikes me that we're getting awfully close to the line of exercising editorial discretion. And forgive me for thinking that way, but if that is, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, it does call into question then the immunity provided under Section 230. Maybe it is not the problem with the law itself, Section 230. Maybe the problem is that the mission has changed in your organization and other organizations.
Congressman, I'm not sure what you mean, but we have clear standards against things like terrorist content, child exploitation, incitement of violence, intellectual property violations, pornography, things that I would imagine that you agree with. And
all spelled out in the plain language of Section 230. But again, you're putting restrictions on conservative speech. Mr. Duncan eloquently pointed out how that is occurring. Angie Craig eloquently pointed out how you're putting restrictions on trans-affirming speech. None of those fall into any of the other categories that you're describing. So to the just to the casual observer, it appears that you're exercising editorial authority, and as such, maybe you should be regulated as a publisher as opposed to simply someone who is indifferent to the content that they're carrying.
Congressman, I think one of the virtues of Section 230 is it allows companies to moderate things like bullying that are not always clearly illegal content, but that I think you and I would probably agree are harmful and bad. So I think it's important that companies have the ability to go beyond what is legally required. I do not think that that makes these internet platforms the same thing as a news publisher who is literally writing the content themselves. I do think we have more responsibility than maybe a telephone network where
Let me interrupt you in the interest of time, because I want to pose the same question to Mr. Dorsey. Mr. Dorsey, every presidential tweet that I read following the election had an editorial disclaimer appended to it by you. How does that not make you someone who's exercising editorial discretion on the content that you're carrying?
Our goal with our labels was simply to provide connection to other data and provide context.
Yeah, but you don't do that routinely with other tweets. It seemed to be a singular assignment that someone had taken on to look at whatever the president is publishing. We're going to put our own spin on that. And that, again, that strikes me as an editorial exercise. And the only reason I bring this up, and we are going to have these discussions. I recognize that smaller companies just starting out, the protection of Section 230 may be invaluable to them. But you all are no longer just starting out. You're established, you're mature companies. You exercise enormous control over the thought processes of not just an entire country, but literally an entire world. You are exercising editorial discretion I do think we need to revisit Section 230 in the terms of, have you now become actual publishers as opposed to simply carriers of information? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair